The Last Gas Pump, Route 281, Texas. Part 1. They say there's a stretch of Route 281, somewhere south of San Antonio and north of the desert towns that scrape the Mexican border, where time bends in ways that don't belong to the living. Drivers talk about it in hushed tones, in truck stops and dive bars, the kind of conversations that happen after 2 a.m. when the jukebox has gone quiet and the only sound left is the hum of the beer cooler. They don't always mention it by name, because naming something is a way of giving it life, a way of confirming that it's not just a whisper or a fever dream, but something real. Still, the story gets told over and over like a bad song on repeat. The version I heard, and it's always someone's cousin or a friend of a friend who swears they saw it, goes like this. There's a glowing, old-fashioned gas station that rises up out of nowhere when you're lost, low on fuel, and desperate. It looks like a postcard from the 1950s. A squat white building with red trim, 2 pumps out front standing like soldiers, their glass globes faintly humming with a phosphorescent glow. A neon sign buzzes in the night, its letters spelling out, "Last Stop Gas," in a ghostly blue-green. The gravel lot crunches under your tires, and you feel relief, real gut-punching relief, because there's nothing out here for miles and the needle on your gauge has been kissing empty. Inside, there's no attendant you can see, no clerk behind the counter, no register ringing up sales. Yet the pumps work. You slide your credit card, the nozzle fits into your tank, and the gasoline flows smooth as honey. The air smells faintly sweet, not like diesel or octane but like something floral, something almost rotten beneath it. Honeysuckle gone to mildew, roses wilting in a vase. The drivers say you fill up, maybe grab a candy bar or a bottle of water from inside, the fridge humming, light buzzing, though no one's around, and then you drive off into the dark Texas night, thinking you've been lucky. But the next morning, when the sun comes up and you're far down the road, you check your gauge and it's still full. Only it's not fuel in there. Not anymore. It's blood. Thick, dark, iron-scented blood sloshing in the tank like some hideous transfusion, dripping from the filler cap if you open it, coating your engine, ruining everything it touches. Some say it's human, some say it's not, something older, meaner. They say the ones who keep driving after that, who don't immediately torch their car or leave it abandoned on the shoulder, end up disappearing. Not just missing in the police reports kind of way, but gone, erased like they never existed at all. And that's the tale told in the bars and truck stop. Folks laugh it off, of course, because that's what you do with ghost stories. You laugh, you drink, you call bullshit. But every so often, too often, if you're paying attention, a car really does get found abandoned out there. Gas tank ruptured, tires melted down to the rims, windshield spiderwebbed from the inside. And always, always, the faint smell of copper and roses hanging in the air like a curse that won't fade. That story, the one about the tanks brimming with blood, was the kind of thing that stuck in my head long after I should have laughed it off and gone to bed. My name's Daniel "Danny" Hargrove, and I'd been driving trucks for near 15 years when I first heard it. I wasn't the kind of man to spook easy. Long-haul truckers don't get to be. You see too much night highway, too many empty rest stops, too many shadows in the ditches, to let ghost stories keep you awake. But there was something about that tale, told to me by a grease-smeared mechanic in a rundown diner outside Kerrville, that sank its claws deep. Maybe it was the way his eyes darted around as he spoke, like he was making sure something wasn't listening. Maybe it was the sour smell of the coffee that night, burnt and old, making the whole place feel wrong. Or maybe it was because I knew Route 281 better than most. I'd driven that blacktop more nights than I could count, its 2 lanes stretching forever through the mesquite and cedar scrub, through hills that rolled like the backs of sleeping giants. There's a loneliness on that road that can hollow a man out if he lets it. The radio crackles with static, cell service dies, and the stars look like a million cold eyes staring down. So when the mechanic leaned in, his breath hot and reeking of onions, and whispered that he knew a fella, swore on his mother's grave, who'd filled up at a glowing station out there one night, I didn't laugh. I just nodded, took another sip of the bitter coffee, and told him to go on. He said the man had been on his way to San Antonio, running low on gas, needle-buried. Out of nowhere, the station appeared. He filled up, paid with a card that never showed up on his statement, and drove off into the dark. Next morning, his truck broke down near Blanco. When the tow crew popped his tank, they nearly choked. The stench was unbearable. The tank sloshed red, thick and foul. Blood. Human maybe. The man vanished 2 weeks later. Left his rig in the yard, house empty, dog starving in the back. And then the mechanic just stopped talking, stared down into his cup like it might answer for him. I wanted to call bullshit. I really did. But when I hit the road again that night, heading south along that endless ribbon of blacktop, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the dark had more teeth than I'd ever let myself believe. Out there, with nothing but my headlights and the whisper of tires against asphalt, I thought I saw a glow far off in the distance, faint and flickering like neon trying to breathe. I pressed harder on the pedal, half hoping, half dreading, that I'd find out if the story was true. The glow didn't last. 1 minute it was there, a shimmer on the horizon like a mirage above hot pavement, and the next it was gone, swallowed whole by the black Texas night. I told myself it had been nothing more than a reflection, maybe the way my headlights hit a roadside sign or the glassy eyes of a deer in the brush. But the thought festered, a splinter in the mind. Every driver knows that feeling, when your gut insists something's wrong even though your brain's rolling its eyes. So I drove with one hand tight on the wheel, the other hovering near the CB, like maybe I'd call out to anyone else awake and moving through the night. But the radio was dead quiet, not even the occasional burst of chatter you hear from insomniac truckers or the lonely good OL boys in their pickups. Just static, dead air. And then, the silence got heavier, if you can believe that, like the road itself had gone hollow. The hum of my tires seemed muffled, the engine less of a roar and more of a breath. I checked the dash, everything normal. Speed steady. Gas holding just above a quarter tank. My pulse was a hammer in my throat, though I kept telling myself to knock it off, to quit acting like a spooked rookie. Still, the longer I rolled down that road, the more I started noticing little things. The stars above weren't twinkling anymore, they just hung there, cold and fixed, as if painted on. The mesquite trees at the edge of my headlights seemed bent, leaning inward, like they were trying to crowd the asphalt. And the air had changed, thicker, damper, carrying a faint smell I couldn't place at first. It wasn't oil or sage or the dust of dry cedar. It was metallic, coppery, sweet in that sour way fruit gets when it's overripe. I rolled the window up, but it clung to me, seeping into the cab like it belonged there. I told myself it was roadkill. Plenty of that out here. Deer, coyotes, even the occasional cow that wandered too far. But deep down I knew better. Roadkill didn't make the hairs on your neck stand up like static. Roadkill didn't make the shadows between fence posts seem to breathe. My eyes kept darting to the mirror, half expecting to see headlights behind me. But there was nothing. Just the ribbon of road disappearing into dark, like I was the last soul left alive in Texas. And maybe I was, because in that moment I swear I could almost hear something moving out there, just beyond the reach of my beams, something big, slow, dragging itself along, whispering through the brush. I turned up the radio, desperate for even static, but the speakers gave nothing back. Just silence, heavy and endless, as if the world itself had stopped breathing. By the time the clock on the dash crawled past midnight, I was bone-tired and strung out, the kind of exhaustion that makes the world warp at the edges. I'd been on the road too long, sure, but this was different. This was the kind of fatigue that felt pressed onto me, like a weight added from outside, not just from my own body failing. My eyes kept drifting, catching on shadows that didn't make sense, and more than once I thought I saw figures standing just off the shoulder. Not people exactly, too still for that, too tall, like scarecrows hammered into the earth. Their heads seemed tilted, watching, though every time I blinked they were gone. That's when the needle dipped dangerously close to empty. My stomach sank. I knew I'd topped off earlier that evening outside Marble Falls, knew I had enough to make it through to San Antonio, but the gauge was lying to me now, or else the truck was eating fuel like a dying beast gulping air. I cursed under my breath, slapped the wheel, tried to shake the dread building in my chest. And then I saw it. The glow again. Not faint this time. Not distant. Bright, steady, undeniable, cutting through the black like a beacon. Neon blue-green letters hovered against the void, stuttering as if the sign were decades old and tired. Last stop gas. I should have laughed. Should have turned the rig around, no matter how much the tank threatened to give out. Every instinct screamed don't. But you know how it is, when relief dangles itself in front of you after miles of fear and emptiness. I told myself it was just another station, some forgotten relic still hanging on, and I aimed my truck toward it like a drowning man spotting driftwood. The gravel crunched under my tires exactly the way the stories said. My headlights swept across the white siding, chipped and peeling, across the twin pumps standing at attention like sentries. Their glass globes glowed faintly, pulsing like they were alive. The whole station hummed with a sound just on the edge of hearing, not quite machinery, not quite music. I cut the engine, but for a long minute I couldn't make myself open the door. My hand hovered over the latch while sweat prickled cold down my spine. I told myself I was being stupid, that it was just a gas station in the middle of nowhere, and hell, wasn't I lucky to have found it? But when I finally forced the door open, the night air hit me thick and sweet, and I nearly gagged. Roses. Not the fresh bloom you'd give a girl, but the heavy, rotting perfume of flowers left too long in stagnant water. It clung to everything, the pumps, the gravel, the very air itself, and underneath it, fainter but sharper, was that copper tang I'd smelled on the road. Blood. My stomach nodded. But my truck was dying, and I was stranded, and there are moments in a man's life when the choices he makes aren't really choices at all. So I stepped out onto the gravel, shut the door behind me, and walked toward the pump, each step echoing too loud in the silence, like I was trespassing on ground that wasn't meant for the living. Up close, the pumps looked older than any I'd ever seen, still standing, like something from a black-and-white photo out of my grandfather's time. The paint was chipped, sun-bleached down to bone gray, and the glass globes atop them glowed with that faint, sickly light that made the shadows crawl. I ran my hand across the metal. Cold, too cold, like it had been sitting in ice rather than the Texas night. The nozzle fit neatly into my palm, heavier than it ought to be, like I was gripping a tool instead of a hose. I slid my card through the slot, half expecting sparks to fly or the machine to reject it outright, but the screen blinked to life, numbers rolling across in green that looked more like handwriting than digit. Approve. My mouth went dry. I hadn't even entered a pin. I swallowed hard, glanced over my shoulder at the empty road. Nothing. Just my rig, hulking in the glow of the sign, and the dark beyond it stretching out forever. So I turned back and pushed the nozzle into my tank. The click of the trigger sounded like a gunshot in the silence. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it. A slow, steady gurgle, liquid rushing through the hose. I breathed out in relief, but the smell hit me almost at once. Thick, sweet, metallic, more perfume than gasoline. My first instinct was to pull the nozzle out, stop it right then, but my body wouldn't move. It was like the weight of the night pressed down on me, holding me there, forcing me to watch as the gauge on the pump began to climb. 1 gallon. 2. 3. The numbers rolled unnaturally smooth, too fast, like the pump wasn't measuring fuel at all but just running through a performance. My eyes locked on the hose, and I thought, no, I knew, I saw the liquid moving inside. Not the clear, amber shimmer of gasoline, but something darker, thicker, almost black in the strange glow. My heart thudded, my breath ragged. I yanked the nozzle free and the stream cut off with a hiss that sounded too alive, like a snake retreating into its hole. A single drop clung to the metal tip before falling onto the gravel. In the faint light, it gleamed red. Not oil. Not fuel. Blood. I staggered back, nearly tripping over my own boots, bile rising hot in my throat. The pump clicked once, twice, like it was resetting itself. The numbers zeroed out. Approved. Ready again. I wiped my hand against my jeans, and it left a smear so dark it almost looked black until the neon light hit it. Then it shone red, unmistakable. My body screamed to run, get back in the truck, floor it until the wheels came off. But the truck's engine was quiet, the gauge still hovering near empty, and I knew what the stories had said. Once you stop here, once you use it, you're not the one making choices anymore. I stood there shaking, the night pressing in close, and realized I wasn't alone. Not really. Something moved behind the glass of the station window, a shadow long and thin, bending wrong, watching me with patience. The glass door creaked when I touched it, the sound sharp and brittle like an old bone snapping. For a heartbeat I told myself not to go inside, that whatever I thought I saw in there was just a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the flickering neon. But curiosity is a poison, and fear has a way of pushing you forward when you ought to stand still. I pulled the door open, and the smell hit me like a wall. Roses, heavy and cloying, layered over that copper stink of pennies and old wounds. The air was thick, humid, as if the place had been sealed for years without a breath of wind. Inside, the station looked frozen in time. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with candy bars and wrappers that hadn't been printed since the 70s, cans of soda whose brands no longer existed, bags of chips gone pale beneath a film of dust. A humming refrigerator in the corner rattled and wheezed, its glass streaked, but inside I could see bottles of water, perfectly clear, lined up in neat rows as if waiting for me. A fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, buzzing with a rhythm like a dying insect, throwing the room into pulses of shadow and light. And there, behind the counter, was movement. I froze, my heart clawing against my ribs. Something was there, but it wasn't shaped right. Too tall, too narrow, its limbs like stretched-out wire hangers under a drape of skin too loose for the frame it clung to. It didn't move like a man. It swayed, subtle, side to side, like it was breathing in slow, syrupy pulls. I squinted, trying to focus, but the flicker of the bulb kept breaking the image apart, like frames missing from an old film reel. My instinct was to speak, to ask if the station was open, if anyone was there, even though I knew damn well what the answer would be. But my throat locked tight, and all I managed was a croak that echoed louder than it had any right to in that dead room. The figure tilted its head at the sound. The motion was slow, deliberate, like a marionette tugged by strings, and though I couldn't see its face, I felt its attention hook into me sharp as a knife point. The hum of the fridge deepened, rattling, almost a growl. The smell of roses swelled stronger, suffocating, curling down into my lungs until I thought I might gag. And then, in the harsh pulse of the flickering light, I realized something that made my knees weaken. The shelves weren't covered in dust at all. Not dust. The gray film coated everything, thick and soft, and with each pulse of light I swore I saw it rise, drifting like breath in the air, as though the room itself had been burned down and resurrected. The figure moved again, just a fraction, but enough to snap me out of my trance. My survival instinct took hold. I backed toward the door, keeping my eyes on the counter, refusing to blink though they burned with tears. My hand found the handle, slick with my own sweat, and I yanked the door open so hard it slammed against the wall outside. The night air rushed in cool and sharp, carrying away the stink for a blessed instant. But before I could run, before I could even think, I heard a sound from inside. Not a voice exactly, more like a whisper stretched thin, a word dragged across glass. Stay. I didn't stay. God help me, maybe I should have. Maybe walking back out into that black Texas night was the worse of two choices, but instinct had me bolting before the whisper even finished curling through the air. I stumbled across the gravel, half blind, boots slipping on the loose stones, and practically slammed myself into the side of my rig. My hands shook so bad I could hardly get the door open, but I managed, hauling myself inside and slamming it shut like a child hiding under the covers. For a second I just sat there, chest heaving, sweat trickling cold down my spine, ears straining for any sound outside. Nothing. Just the hum of the sign, steady and faint through the glass. I twisted the key, and the engine roared to life with a comfort that almost brought tears to my eyes. Normal sound, familiar sound, the heartbeat of the road. I shoved the truck into gear and rolled forward, gravel crunching loud beneath my wheels, as if the whole earth were listening. My eyes darted to the fuel gauge, and for a sick instant I thought it hadn't moved at all, still clinging low near empty. Then, like a lazy breath, the needle rose. Quarter. Half. Full. It climbed smooth as silk, and when it settled, the glow behind the gauge looked wrong. Too red, like someone had lit it from inside with a coal instead of a bulb. My stomach turned. The stories came crashing back into my head. Full tank. Full of blood. I didn't want to believe it. Couldn't. But the smell crept into the cab with the rising gauge, iron and roses, faint but undeniable. I gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened, forcing my eyes to the road. Don't look back, I told myself. Just drive. Just get away. The highway opened up ahead, black ribbon, stretching out forever, and I pressed down on the pedal harder than I should have. The truck surged forward, the station shrinking in the mirror. Relief washed through me, shaky, thin, like maybe I'd outrun it. But then the radio snapped on by itself. No warning. No hand on the dial. Just a burst of static that made me flinch so hard I nearly swerved into the ditch. Out of the crackle came a voice. Low. Wet. Like someone whispering through a mouthful of water. Stay. My blood froze. I slapped the radio off, but the voice lingered in the cab, woven into the hum of the engine, into the very air, curling around me like smoke. The road stretched on, endless, and I realized with a jolt of terror that I couldn't see the stars anymore. Not one. Just black sky pressing down, heavy and suffocating, as if I'd driven off the map of the world and into somewhere else entirely. I drove hard for what felt like hours, eyes locked on the double yellow lines, but the world around me refused to change. No road signs, no mile markers, not even the faint glow of a farmhouse off in the distance. Just asphalt, trees crowding closer with every mile, and that black sky hanging above like a lid clamped down over a pot. My chest grew tighter with every passing minute, and somewhere in the back of my head a cold certainty began to bloom. I wasn't leaving. Not really. No matter how far I pressed the pedal, no matter how many miles I thought I covered, the road was a loop, circling me back into its rotten gut. The smell of roses thickened in the cab until it coated my tongue, made me swallow against bile. I cracked the window, desperate for clean air, but what rushed in wasn't clean. It was damp, heavy, carrying the stink of copper so strong it burned my nostrils. That's when the headlights began to falter, dimming as though the dark were swallowing the beams whole. I cursed, pounded the dash, but it made no difference. The glow shrank to a weak cone barely cutting through 10 feet ahead. My knuckles ached on the wheel, every muscle screaming to keep driving, but the road ahead was vanishing, the world itself collapsing into black. And then, there it was. That glow again. Neon, steady, cutting through the void with cruel clarity. Last stop gas. My heart dropped into my gut. I slammed the brakes, tires shrieking, the cab rattling around me. When the truck finally skidded to a halt, gravel crunched beneath the wheels. Gravel. I blinked, disbelieving, throat closing. My headlights lit the white siding of the station, the same chip trim, the same twin pumps standing sentinel. The sign buzzed, the letters flickering. I'd come back. No, I'd never left. My hand went numb on the key, though the engine was still running. My reflection stared back from the windshield, pale and hollow-eyed, drenched in sweat. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a broken laugh, sharp and ugly. The stories had been true. All of them. There was no road out, no escape, just the endless circle, the trap snapping shut. And in the corner of my eye, through the flickering neon glow, I saw movement again. The figure behind the glass. Only now, it wasn't waiting behind the counter. It was at the door. Its hand pressed against the glass, long fingers splayed, skin stretched too tight over bone. The whisper came again, louder, clearer, not from the radio this time but from everywhere at once, rising from the gravel, from the pumps, from the very air. Stay. I drove hard for what felt like hours, eyes locked on the double yellow lines, but the world around me refused to change. No road signs, no mile markers, not even the faint glow of a farmhouse off in the distance. Just asphalt, trees crowding closer with every mile, and that black sky hanging above like a lid clamped down over a pot. My chest grew tighter with every passing minute, and somewhere in the back of my head a cold certainty began to bloom. I wasn't leaving. Not really. No matter how far I pressed the pedal, no matter how many miles I thought I covered, the road was a loop, circling me back into its rotten gut. The smell of roses thickened in the cab until it coated my tongue, made me swallow against bile. I cracked the window, desperate for clean air, but what rushed in wasn't clean. It was damp, heavy, carrying the stink of copper so strong it burned my nostrils. That's when the headlights began to falter, dimming as though the dark were swallowing the beams whole. I cursed, pounded the dash, but it made no difference. The glow shrank to a weak cone barely cutting through 10 feet ahead. My knuckles ached on the wheel, every muscle screaming to keep driving, but the road ahead was vanishing, the world itself collapsing into black. And then, there it was. That glow again. Neon, steady, cutting through the void with cruel clarity. Last stop, gas. My heart dropped into my gut. I slammed the brakes, tires shrieking, the cab rattling around me. When the truck finally skidded to a halt, gravel crunched beneath the wheels. Gravel. I blinked, disbelieving, throat closing. My headlights lit the white siding of the station, the same chip trim, the same twin pumps standing sentinel. The sign buzzed, the letters flickering. I'd come back. No, I'd never left. My hand went numb on the key, though the engine was still running. My reflection stared back from the windshield, pale and hollow-eyed, drenched in sweat. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a broken laugh, sharp and ugly. The stories had been true. All of them. There was no road out, no escape, just the endless circle, the trap snapping shut. And in the corner of my eye, through the flickering neon glow, I saw movement again. The figure behind the glass. Only now, it wasn't waiting behind the counter. It was at the door. Its hand pressed against the glass, long fingers splayed, skin stretched too tight over bone. The whisper came again, louder, clearer, not from the radio this time but from everywhere at once, rising from the gravel, from the pumps, from the very air. Stay. I should have driven, should have floored the pedal and taken my chances with whatever trap the road had set for me, but fear has a way of turning the body traitor. My hands clung to the wheel, frozen, while my foot hovered useless above the gas. I could see the figure through the windshield, hand against the glass door of the station, fingers impossibly long, joints bent wrong. It wasn't moving fast. No, it didn't need to. It had the patience of something that knew its prey had already given up. The whisper echoed again, softer now, coaxing, almost kind. Stay. That one word hit something deep in me, the tired, aching part that had been on the road too long, worn down by miles and loneliness. I thought of my apartment back in Dallas, empty and quiet, nothing waiting for me but silence. I thought of the divorce papers still unsigned, my wife long gone, my son who barely returned my calls. Stay. The word was a promise, a temptation. No more running, no more driving, no more endless nights staring at broken white lines until your vision blurred. Just stay. For a moment, just a moment, I wanted to. My chest loosened, and I found myself easing back in the seat, the wheel slipping from my hands. That's when the smell hit stronger than ever, copper and roses so thick it burned my throat. My stomach lurched, bile rising hot. And in that instant, something snapped. The rational part of me clawed back control. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't mercy. It wasn't comfort. It was a trap dressed in perfume. I slammed my hand down on the gearshift, teeth gritted, and shoved the truck into reverse. The tires spun on gravel, shrieking, then caught with a jolt that rattled my bones. I didn't look at the figure again. I couldn't, but in the corner of my eye I saw its head tilt, too far, like a crow watching roadkill. I floored it, heart pounding, as the station fell back into the dark behind me. But even as I tore down the road, wheels spitting gravel like bullets, the whisper lingered inside my skull, wrapped around my thoughts like barbed wire. Stay, stay, stay. The highway stretched ahead, but it didn't feel like any road I'd ever driven. The blacktop was too smooth, too perfect, not a crack or patch of gravel anywhere. My headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark, but the light seemed to die too soon, like the night itself was swallowing it. I pressed the pedal hard, the engine roaring, my rig eating up miles, but the scenery refused to change. Fence posts blurred past, mesquite trees bent inward, their branches twisted together like fingers interlacing in prayer, or in hunger. Sweat poured down my temples, soaking the collar of my shirt, but I didn't dare take my hands from the wheel to wipe it. Every nerve screamed that if I let go, even for a second, the truck would veer off into the black, and I'd never find my way back. I kept checking the mirrors, praying I wouldn't see those neon letters glowing behind me. Nothing. Only the endless, starless dark pressing close on both sides. For a while, that gave me hope. Maybe I'd shaken it. Maybe the stories weren't the whole truth, and there was a way out if you had the guts to push through. I clung to that thought like a drowning man to driftwood. But then the gauge caught my eye. Still full. The needle hadn't budged, and the glow behind it had grown brighter, redder, pulsing faintly as though keeping time with a heartbeat. I felt it in my chest, that rhythm, heavy and wrong, thudding against my ribs. I swallowed hard, tried to focus on the road, but then the smell came back. Roses and iron. Stronger than ever. It seeped into the cab no matter how I shut the vents, no matter how tight I gripped the wheel. And then I heard it again, this time not a whisper but a chorus. A dozen voices, maybe more, low and wet, weaving together in a chant that filled the cab without sound. Stay, stay, stay. My throat closed, my lungs burning like I'd swallowed smoke. The road began to shimmer in front of me, the yellow lines bending, twisting into shapes I couldn't recognize. Circles, spirals, symbols older than language. My vision blurred, the wheel trembling in my hands. The voices rose higher, drowning out the engine. I blinked hard, fighting the pull, but when my eyes cleared, my stomach dropped. Up ahead, glowing steady in the dark, was the sign. Last stop gas. Same as before. I'd driven in a circle. The station waited, humming in the night, its neon buzzing like a fly trapped against glass. My gut turned to stone when that sign flickered into view again. It wasn't just that I'd looped back. The horror was deeper, older, like the road itself had folded me in its jaws and chewed until I came back to the same cursed spot. I slammed both palms against the steering wheel, teeth clenched so hard I thought they might crack. No, I muttered, voice ragged. No, no, no. But the station didn't care. It stood there in the dark, waiting, humming, its twin pumps glowing faint as watchful eyes. My truck rattled beneath me like it knew, engine growling low, and that's when I felt it, the shift. Not in the road, not in the sky, but in the cab itself. A presence. The air grew thicker, clotted, the stench of roses and copper boiling until my stomach lurched. My rearview mirror caught movement where there shouldn't have been any. A shape in the sleeper berth. At first I thought it was a trick, just shadows cast by the dashboard glow. But no. It moved. Slow. Deliberate. Rising. My skin went cold, sweat freezing on my neck. I didn't dare turn around, not fully, but in the mirror I saw enough. Something tall, hunched to fit in the space, its head cocked at an unnatural angle, limbs too long, skin loose and pale, hanging like damp sheets over bone. It pressed one hand against the wall, leaving a smear behind, and though the glass warped the details, I swore the smear was red. My breath came shallow, sharp, every instinct begging me to run, but where could I go? The road circled me back, the station waited ahead, and now this thing was inside my truck. My truck. The one place I'd always trusted, the one space that had been mine alone on the endless road. I gripped the wheel until my hands cramped, eyes fixed forward, refusing to look again. If I didn't turn, if I didn't acknowledge it, maybe it would vanish like a bad dream. The whisper curled around my ear, close, too close, though I could see in the mirror its mouth had never moved. Stay. The word rattled inside my skull, sweet as poison, heavy as lead. And when I finally found the strength to glance back at the mirror, heart slamming like a hammer, the berth was empty. Nothing there. Just the faint trace of a smear sliding slow down the wall, glistening dark in the neon glow. I couldn't stay in the cab. The air had gone rotten, thick with that stench, and even though the berth looked empty, every nerve in my body screamed it wasn't. I slammed the rig into park and threw the door open, boots hitting gravel with a crunch that sounded too loud in the silence. My legs wobbled beneath me, but I forced them to move, stumbling a few steps away from the truck before I dared look back. My headlights still burned, weak cones spilling against the siding of the gas station. The neon buzzed and flickered, casting that green-blue glow over the pumps, but my truck sat there in its light like it didn't belong to me anymore. Like I'd abandoned it, or maybe like it had abandoned me. The windows reflected the glow, dark and warped, and for one sickening moment I thought I saw movement inside, something pale sliding across the seat. My chest clenched, and I fought the urge to vomit. That was my home on the road, my safe space, and now it was a cage I couldn't return to. The night pressed down heavier without the cab around me. The silence wasn't silence anymore. It was listening, waiting. The trees at the edge of the lot bent closer, their shadows writhing like they were trying to crawl across the gravel. My breath steamed in the air, though the night wasn't cold, and the smell of roses hit stronger than ever, curling around me like smoke. The pumps hummed faintly, that same low vibration, and I realized with a shudder that the sound was keeping time with my heartbeat. Faster when I panicked, slower when I tried to calm down, as if the station itself were sinking with me. I staggered back another step, gravel crunching, eyes darting from pump to door to the dark road behind. I should have bolted into the night, even if the road looped me back. But where do you run when the trap isn't a place but a hunger that's claimed you already? My gaze landed on the glass door of the station. The figure wasn't behind it anymore. Empty. Dark. Waiting. My skin crawled. I felt watched from every angle, but the lot stretched bare around me. That's when I realized the hum of the pumps had deepened, a low growl now, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I looked down and nearly screamed. The gravel wasn't dry anymore. It was wet. Dark patches spreading, seeping between the stones, sticky and red. The lot was bleeding. At first, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Blood didn't seep from gravel. It didn't bubble up between stones like water in a spring, but that's exactly what it was doing. Thick and dark, glistening under the sick glow of the neon, it spread in pulsing veins that crept outward from the base of the pumps. My boots stuck slightly when I tried to step back, the ground tacky with it, and the stench slammed into me so hard my eyes watered. Copper. Roses. Decay. My stomach churned, throat clamped shut, but what froze me wasn't the smell, it was the motion. The blood was moving. Not just spreading but sliding, inching toward me with deliberate, unnatural intent. I staggered backward, nearly tripping over myself, but every step I took the slick patches followed, dragging like a tide being pulled by some monstrous moon. And God help me, I realized it wasn't just creeping at random, it was flowing toward me. It wanted me. I bolted then, boots slamming against the lot, breath tearing from my lungs in ragged gasps. The neon light pulsed as I ran, the pumps buzzing louder, faster, almost gleeful, as if the station itself were laughing at the chase. I tried not to look down, but I couldn't help it. The blood kept pace with me, streams of it racing ahead in spidery cracks between the stones, cutting me off, circling me in, driving me back toward the pumps. I spun wild, searching for escape, but every direction I turned the lot bled thicker, the ground slicker, until I was penned in a shrinking island of dry gravel. Panic clawed up my throat, and I could barely think past the pounding in my skull. Then the whisper came again, curling sweet and venomous around my ear, closer than before, like breath on my skin. Stay. My knees buckled, nearly dropping me into the pool that was forming at my feet. The surface shimmered under the neon glow, reflecting my face back at me, pale and wild-eyed. But it wasn't my reflection. Its mouth was moving, smiling. Blood dripped down its chin, soaking its shirt, my shirt, while its lips shaped the word again. Stay. I snapped my head up, refusing to look at that warped reflection again. If I let it hold me, even for another second, I knew I'd collapse right there into the pool, sink into it like quicksand, drown in the stink of copper and roses. My body shook, adrenaline burning through me, and I did the only thing my instincts screamed. I ran. Not careful steps, not measured strides, just wild, desperate, lung-tearing flight across the bleeding lot. My boots slipped, almost pitched me face-first into the slick patches, but somehow I kept moving, lungs clawing for air. I fixed my eyes on the darkness past the neon, the open stretch of Route 281, that endless black ribbon I'd once cursed but now would have given anything to reach. But the lot didn't want me gone. The pumps groaned like beasts, their humming pitch climbing higher, sharper, cutting through the night like a saw blade. The ground pulsed under me, each step sinking a fraction deeper than it should, like the earth itself was softening, liquefying beneath the tide of blood. My muscles screamed, but I forced them harder, legs pistoning, arms pumping. The whisper followed me, not one voice now but many, overlapping, echoing, some high, some low, some broken with laughter. Stay, stay, stay. I stumbled against the edge of the lot, boots hitting the cracked asphalt of the road. Relief almost shattered me, my chest buckled, a sob tore free, but before I could take another step, the sound hit me. A rush. A wave. I looked down. The blood had beaten me to it. It spilled over the edge of the lot, streaking across the blacktop in long, grasping fingers, hunting me even here. I didn't think. I hurled myself forward, sprinting down the center of 281 like the devil himself was snapping at my heels. My truck, my gear, everything I owned, I left it behind without a second thought. All I knew was this: if I slowed, if I tripped, if I so much as let the voices slip deeper into my skull, I'd never leave. My heart slammed so hard I could taste iron in my mouth. The glow of the gas station faded behind me, swallowed by the dark. And for the briefest, cruelest moment I thought I'd won. But then the headlights appeared ahead. Blinding, sudden, flooding the road in white. I skidded, threw my arms up, and froze. It wasn't a car. It was the station. The same glowing pumps, the same flickering sign, standing right in the middle of the highway, waiting for me. For a heartbeat I just stood there in the middle of the road, chest heaving, sweat stinging my eyes, staring at the impossible sight ahead. The gas station hadn't followed me. No, that was too ridiculous, even in this nightmare, but somehow I'd circled back. In less than a minute of sprinting full out, lungs ready to rip from my chest, I was right where I'd started. The pumps glowed, their green-blue neon halo shimmering in the night air, like a lighthouse beacon for the damned. The sign buzzed faintly, letters cracked and smeared, but still spelling that same word: open. My body sagged with exhaustion and disbelief. Roads don't bend back on themselves. Asphalt doesn't conspire against you. But the proof was in front of me, humming, watching. I stumbled forward, half crazed, refusing to accept it. Maybe I'd turned by accident, maybe panic had spun me around. I veered left off the main stretch, boots hammering against a thin service road, heart clawing hope from the darkness. No neon ahead, just black trees swallowing the path. My relief lasted seconds. The branches bent low, their shadows merging into a tunnel, and at the end of it, glowing like it had been there forever, the pumps again. My knees buckled. I fell to the asphalt, palms scraping rough tar, a cry tearing out of my throat that sounded too much like laughter. A trap. I was running a goddamn hamster wheel, and the station was the cage at the center. No matter the direction, no matter the speed, the road would only ever take me back to it. I staggered to my feet again, fury boiling through the terror now. I screamed into the night, my voice raw, echoing off unseen walls of trees. "What do you want from me?" The silence swallowed it whole, thick and choking. Then, faint, curling out from the pumps like smoke, came the answer, hundreds of voices speaking as one, soft as a sigh, sharp as a blade. "We want you home." The word home struck me deeper than I wanted to admit. Not because it was true. I had no ties to this cursed stretch of highway, no reason to feel any belonging here, but because of how the voices said it. Soft, coaxing, almost tender, like a lullaby a mother might hum over a crib. My chest tightened, and for a sick instant, some part of me wanted to believe them. I pictured the station not as a trap but as shelter, its humming neon a porch light left on just for me, its pumps waiting with open arms. My brain scrambled to stitch comfort over horror, and that terrified me more than the blood, more than the whispers. I knew, with every instinct screaming red in my skull, that if I let that feeling settle, if I started to think of the station as refuge, I was lost. Still, my feet moved without my say-so, dragging me closer, crunch of gravel loud in my ears. The air thickened with the smell, coppery sweet, a perfume that coated the back of my throat until I gagged. The building behind the pumps came clearer, its peeling paint catching slivers of neon, the windows dark but alive with faint movement. Shadows sliding along the glass like they were pacing, waiting. I froze again at the bottom of the steps. The door, crooked, paint blistered, stood open just a crack, bleeding faint yellow light, the kind of glow you see under a bedroom door at night. That whisper rose again, softer now, coaxing. "Come inside. You're tired. You belong here." I shook my head violently, fists clenched at my sides, trying to anchor myself in pain, in fury. But my hand still lifted, trembling, reaching for that door like it had always been mine. And God help me, when I looked at the windows, the shadows had stopped pacing. They were staring.